That's like super offensive. How's it going, Jacob?
It's going great, Dr. Kelly. I'm excited to get your opinion on all things Glenn Gould today.
Oh, you want to talk about Glenn Gould? Okay, we got a lot to talk about.
So I've sent you the Chromatic Fantasy by Johann Sebastian Bach, and I wanted to get your, opinion on just Glenn's technique and his musicianship, your raw, unadulterated piano professor take. We mentioned him a little bit in our last episode, and I wanted to go all the way with it.
All right, cool. Let's do it. Let's dive in and let's check out this Chromatic Fantasy and Fugue. Let's pause real quick. So what do you know about Glenn Gould?
I know that he's Canadian. I know that he was very opinionated and also kind of had this idea about the interpretation of classical music where he didn't want to slavishly, necessarily play a historically accurate Baroque interpretation. He's like, I'm the man, I'm Glenn. I'm playing Bach, and so he took a lot of liberties with he called it recomposing, and just would interpret in his own way, bring out accents, bring out phrasing, try to bring out new parts of the music. It's like we need to keep this music alive by constantly reinventing it. Yeah,
that's a good point. And because of that, he's kind of a difficult figure, especially if you're like a beginning pianist. So he's very much knows the rules really well for kind of how to phrase things and is very aware of the rules as he's breaking them. He's very much like that, which makes him kind of problematic if you're a beginner. So you're 100% right. And in this case, he starts off, the whole piece, it sounds like an etude. He's just busting through it. If he came in and I didn't know he was Glenn Gould, I'd be like, why is it all one long line? You need to start a little slower, and you need to taper down the end of the phrase. It doesn't do any of that, right? That's kind of I don't know how you would teach it as a teacher. Let's see. You'd want to taper those phrases and make them soft toward the end. He just busts through.
Yeah, each of his notes are like a laser beam. He's just so precise and just they're all even, or for the most part even volume, and just little just punches of sound that come through.
And there's no phrasing. There's not a ton of dynamic. It's like an etude. And so, but he's aware of all those things, right? He's just kind of look at my amazing technique, right, in this, which would piss a lot of teachers off, honestly, even if you had amazing technique. In fact, I listened to him. I repeated this mistake in my doctorate when I learned this piece, and I'd been playing for years at this point, and I really liked the way he played it. I love the etude, and so I listened to him, and I kind of copied. And I remember one of the piano professors was like, I completely disagree with everything you just did. After a performance, and I was like, I like Glenn Gould. I like it. I liked it that way, so I copied it. Then I kind of learned how I studied with him a little bit and learned what he was thinking or how to do it. But just be wary if you're going to listen to Glenn Gould as your person. You are on the fringe. There's a really famous story. I think it's the Brahms D minor piano concerto. And he played the first movement just as slow as the second movement. kind of like what you were talking about, is sort of like a reinvention. Like he wanted to like reinvent the piece, and he's like, I think I think it should all be like one tempo and one movement, and it just drove everybody mad. In fact, I think Bernstein was conducting that performance, and he made an announcement before and said, I don't agree with what Glenn Gould is about to do, but I respect him as an artist, and so we're gonna play. So he basically was just like, don't blame me for this. I think this is a train wreck.
I wash my hands of this out of respect, for Glenn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Just some other stuff. He sat and he sits lower on the piano, way lower than anybody else. He would sit in a chair instead of a bench. He actually carried this chair with him everywhere he went. He was really really sensitive about his like hands. He didn't like shaking people's hands. He felt like people, I think he shook a Steinway representative's hands, and they shook him too hard, and he was afraid it like injured him. And then later in life, he got really into like audio, and like he was creating all these like kind of pieces, audio, video. I think he did it was like something about Antarctica or something. He did this whole like big audio video series, and none of it's like super good. Like it's not, especially by like today's standards. He was kind of like always, I feel like Glenn Gould, this is just an opinion, but I feel like he was just such a master at playing all these old works, but he was like dissatisfied with that. He wanted to like create, but I think I remember him, he wrote some pieces, and he stopped writing, and someone asked him why he stopped writing, and he said, because there's enough mediocre music in the world. And I feel like he's a genius. I feel like he just could have kept going. Maybe his first stuff wasn't like Mozart, Beethoven level brilliant, but like he had the brain. I bet he could have done it. I bet he was just kind of like intimidated because he knew the pieces by the masters like so well that when he compared his new stuff. But I feel like we missed out on some cool compositions if he would have just kept going and kept writing and gotten better at it. Just an opinion, though. He's super famous for conducting his right hand with his left hand and singing. Now finally we get some lyrical and some pedal as well. He's kind of using half pedal, I think. Ben just pressed that's like super offensive to a lot of classical piano ears. Even though he's more lyrical, like I think he's still, less lyrical than this is usually done. It's still more angular. I think he's from the same town as Oscar Peterson.
Something in the water there.
Yeah. Give me some of that, whatever's in the water. I forgot how much of this piece is just so improvisatory, right? It's written out. It's like composed, but it's composed like a completely free I think Glenn Gould, so right there, he's a master of articulation right here too. Like how he puts space in between the notes or not. Right? There was tiny spaces in between that trill. Look how low his face is too, just in this shot. You see, he played lower than any of the piano, reaching up to it, which is another like total no-no if you're teaching somebody. Like you don't do that.
Does make for a good camera angle.
It does, yeah. He's like super intimate with the piano, you know, just like. Yeah, I mean, that was insane. This piece is really enjoyable to play because it's actually fugue's hard. But this piece isn't super hard. The improvisatory nature gives you a lot of freedom. Like, I think it's harder stylistically than it is like memory-wise or just execution. Maybe just ignore the style altogether and do what Glenn Gould does. Make up your own stuff. I remember loving this part. Super satisfied with all those falling eighth notes. Da, 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 da. And then here comes the fugue, I believe. Well, that's honestly plenty. The fugue is the fugue's a beast, but I actually think the chromatic fantasy is more interesting to talk about because the fugue, he plays it like a fugue, and he's just like a total phenom. I don't think if you say like Bach fugue, like I don't think anybody in the world would say that he's not like the undisputed champion of the Bach fugue.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
I can't think of anybody else who plays Bach like this guy, or even would even attempt. You know, Horowitz, who was probably like more commercially successful than Gould by a lot, I think. Played Liszt and he played Rachmaninoff, and he wouldn't touch Bach fugues in public. So like, no, that's insane. And so and Gould just did it like it was nothing. So
Yeah, I've managed to stumble my way through that C major fugue, the first one, and I like opened up my score the other day to like see if I could dust it off, and then I closed it. Just like, nah, I'll just work on Mozart or something. I need to chill.
and the thing is you don't even know how hard it is and what I mean by that is I remember like being in my master's after having like studied for a year, and the level of detail that we went into the Bach fugue. I think I played the E major one. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is way harder than I even imagined. Like the deeper you go into it, into like how to do it well, how to hold the different voices, how to phrase the different voices. Because it's not just keeping track of multiple melodies. It's also like, it's phrasing each of those melodies. It's how those melodies communicate with each other.
Yeah. Volume control too. It's almost like you're like a you have a mix board and you're mixing all these voices, but the mixer is your fingers and you can't mess it up at all or you look dumb.
Mixer is your brain, and it's totally unforgiving. It's completely unforgiving. You know, if you're playing like a Chopin nocturne and you have a melody, right? And you have this melody, and you forget something. You know, you can drop out with your left hand for a second. You can't do any of that stuff in a Bach fugue. It is like merciless. You forget, or you in a performance, something even doesn't like sit right technically in your fingers, and like the whole thing can fall apart.
Your nose gets itchy, you know.
Yeah.
A bead of sweat gets in your eye, you're cooked. Yeah, it's it definitely must have those things just like super internalized, which is insane because of just like how insanely like musically dense those pieces are, right? Because, you know, if you like look at Mozart or even Beethoven, the left hand, you just like Alberti bass, cool. So if you practice that enough, you can sort of turn your brain off and just let your right hand do its thing, or let your left hand do its thing while you kind of focus on the right hand. But just how you have to split your focus into the two hands on Bach's music is just ridiculous, which is
well, and that's why everybody
everybody
loved him. He was everybody's favorite composer, like Chopin and Beethoven, and that's not always true. And like I just thought of like a few examples, like where Beethoven wrote things and said fugue, this is a fugue, and they're really difficult. But I don't think any of his fugues or any of his, like, somebody in the comments might disagree with me, but I don't think any of them are as good as Bach's. He was the best at it, and it's insane how good. It's insane how good they are, how relevant they are. It's hundreds of years later, and nobody played him better than Glenn Gould. He was just an absolute master, absolute phenom.
So let me ask you, because he's doing, like you mentioned earlier, the conducting stuff. And I think something that like I watch a lot of videos of great piano players to try to glean as much information off of those performances as possible. But what I do think that possibly can be a pitfall is like misinterpreting the performative motions for technical motions, right? So it's like at some point they're sort of transcending their technique and then they're doing more than is required by the technique to give you a performance that's actually engaging as a viewer. So where do you kind of stand on, you know, Glenn's like technique as far as what's necessary and as far as like what's, because he was a performer, like he knew what he was doing. He's hamming it up a little bit, right? So where do you kind of draw the line between like what's practical and like when do you ham it up for the audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really great question. You can ask this question to 5 different performers, and I think I've heard like 5 different responses. One of the famous examples that I think of is a lot of people criticize or praise Lang Lang because he's very performative at the piano, and some people are like that's distracting and it's like takes away, and some people like I'm more of the camp that I think it adds. Like I enjoy watching Glenn Gould, even though he looks insane. Like I enjoy watching him like be like so into it.
Yeah, I even enjoy the insanity. I think it's fun.
There's also an argument to be made that like those physical gestures affect the way he's playing. It's like he's like coaxing the correct phrasing or searching for the beautiful sound on the piano with his physical movements. So maybe it's more connected to the actual sound than we give it credit. Just because it is psychological. There's creativity in playing, and there's the muse that we all try and find, and maybe that's his way of finding the muse to play like he does.
That's so well put. I completely agree. And then speaking of kind of finding the muse, you mentioned earlier the singing too. And I personally think that that's huge and something that, you know, students should pay attention to, because when I teach students, a lot of times, you know, they might get really good at wiggling those fingers. But then, you know, and when they're trying to play like maybe an improvisation or trying to phrase or trying to like bring more music out of it, they just can't do it, you know, because they've been sold that like, all that this is wiggling your fingers in the right spots. And it's just, there's so much more than that. And I think the quickest way that you can connect what you want to hear and to your hands is by singing.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, you know, do you want to speak on that at all? That'd be interesting to hear your opinions.
Yeah, I tell students to sing along with their playing all the time to like find the phrasing, find the pauses in their phrases, right, in their slur, and also the phrases and how I always point out how we talk. Like we talk in these, we go up and down as we talk, right, and it makes it interesting, and that's how you need to play a melody and all that stuff. And I think that a lot of that musicality is revealed in how you vocalize. I don't think I'm smart enough to tell you, even after all my listenings of Glenn Gould, like how his singing is affecting his phrasing. I will say that I have heard him, like when he plays fugues, he will sing sometimes the line that he wants brought out, that he wants the audience to hear. That's like kind of a simple, but in this chromatic fantasy and fugue, it's actually, because you can't sing that. You can't.
Yeah.
It's like nobody can sing that. Whitney Houston couldn't sing that. Like it's too many notes, too fast, right? And so he's not singing it. He's kind of mumbling something. And so that's where I'm like, I don't know, you know? But yeah, I mean, as far as like singing as a teaching tool and learning phrasing, huge believer in that, obviously. But Glenn Gould, once again, I think in this, I don't know if he's the example I would use of somebody who is doing that, because I don't know that I could say that I understand exactly what he's doing when he's singing it, at least not in a improvisatory, not as fugue-like piece like this.
Right. Or it might even be kind of like Keith Jarrett, where he just can't help it.
Yeah. Keith Jarrett. I mean, kind of same thing. Like Keith Jarrett is like often not. It's almost like moaning. Like it's not. It doesn't all sound musical.
Not following the pitches necessarily, but
it's not necessarily following the pitches. It's like, and again, I don't think I'm intelligent enough to like. I would love to hear Keith Jarrett talk about. I haven't ever heard an interview or read anything where he talks about. I'm sure he talks about it. And I'm sure with his personality, he doesn't ever really say what's really going on in his brain as he does it. He probably tries to remain mystical with it.
Yeah, all I've heard is that he just can't control it. He's tried, and he was not successful, so he just keeps doing it. I mean, and he's making money, off of that. Still making money off that piano record.
He's so good, and that's the thing too. Is like even people that are critics of Glenn Gould or Keith Jarrett or any of this, like nobody can say they're not amazing. They're so good that if you're like an average pianist and you like kind of average and you walk into the conservatory with your chair and you like sit down and play low, not going to go well. You have to. Or like Keith Jarrett, like cursing out audience members for like opening up cough drops. He's like famous for that. Yeah, like if you're like average, like no one's going to stand for that. But if you're a genius, you can get away with some eccentricness. In fact, you probably even benefit from it. It makes you kind of a legend.
On his kind of on the posture and how he's sitting at the piano, what would be for the audience like the Ryan Kelly ideal standard of how to sit at the piano, like the height, the distance, the posture, what does that look like?
Great question. So we've looked at Glenn Gould, right? And don't do that. Don't watch him. Don't use that as an example. That's like, first of all. So the first thing, as far as like, I tell students, whether they're 60 or 6, to grab their knees, and that kind of gives you the right like curve to approach the piano, parallel with the keys. And I like to center my belly button on middle D and keep it there. And I tell students to not slide up and down because it'll throw off their muscle memory as they start leaping octaves and things like that. But yeah, simple. Belly button, middle D, curved fingers, parallel to the keys. Forearms parallel to the keys.
I heard a piano tip, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. They called it the knee test. And it's basically like if your knees don't clear the bed of the piano, or at least get close to clearing it, you're sitting too close to the piano. Do you think there's any truth to that?
That's interesting. I do think that people generally sit too close to the piano from what I've seen. People are a little bit too I think I play with them a little slightly under, so I don't know about clearing them. That's personal, but yeah, I would say slightly under. It probably depends on the body and depends on the student, though. you know. So, but yeah, you definitely don't want to be too close.
Unless you're Glenn.
Unless you're Glenn, then you can do whatever you want. If you got an IQ of 200 and whatever, and you are, you know, and you're Glenn Gould, you can do whatever you want.
So like the overarching lesson of this is just get so good that none of that stuff matters.
Yeah. If you get so good, you can make up your own rules.
Yeah. All right. Well,
For the rest of us mortals, I think it's good to follow the rules. There's a lot of help in that.
time to practice, you know, time to go practice.
Time to go practice.
That's how I feel, like the same way that, you know, we talked about Oscar Peterson, where it's like it either makes you want to quit or makes you want to grind. And, you know, fortunately I'm more in the it makes me want to grind. But I do every now and then, yeah, I get a little bit of a sense of like, yeah, this isn't happening for me, man. Like
Totally.
I'm just
No,
gonna
I mean,
I'm just gonna stick to pop and gospel.
yeah. No, I heard the 18-year-old Korean kid Yun Shim Lim playing the Transcendental Etudes, and I wanted to quit. I'm like,
Yeah.
that kid's 18. See ya. You know, I played those pieces. I'm not even close to his level, not even in the same universe. But you know what? That's the way it goes. He does that. I run Piano by Pictures and teach thousands of people, and we both got cool jobs, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, piano is just fun. No matter what. Like it's even fun if you're just starting, you know? I think there's actually a lot of joy in being a beginner. Just
Yeah.
experiment, finding things, you know, cuz you get to discover everything, you know. Once you've kind of been doing it a while, there's still things are always things to discover, but the frequency at which you discover them is less, yeah.
And it's really fun when you're like, oh wow, I've been doing this forever, and I didn't think about that. Yeah, cool. Well, let's end there and thank Mr. Gould for his contribution to Piano by Pictures that doesn't know he's contributing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gould.
All right, Jacob. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kelly. Super great. Thank you.